Welcome to Psychology of Pilgrimage. In this episode, I'm joined by Joacim Hallberg, who is a major in the Swedish Armed Forces and the author of Swedes on the Western Front. It's so nice to see you, Joacim. I'm really looking forward today to talking with you about your book, which is called Swedes on the Western Front, which is about Swedes who were participating in the First World War and who are buried in Belgium. And also all of the research that you've continued to do after this first book publication about Swedish soldiers who served in the First World War. Many of them came to the United States, fought with the American Expeditionary Force, and also many with the British. And you have been able to track them to their final resting places along the Western Front in Belgium and in France.
Yes, that's correct.
How many total soldiers have you compiled information for?
Right now in my research, I have compiled 565 individuals, and those also includes those who are buried in United States, for example. And there are some Swedes actually buried in UK as well, and some other places, but mostly on the Western Front. And also I have covered those who fought for the American forces who were brought back to United States and buried there as well. So those are 565 right now.
Wow, that's a lot of soldiers to trace back to Sweden. What are the criteria that you have set for those soldiers who are included in your research?
In the beginning, I had the criteria that I would follow up soldiers who were Swedish-born and who fought and fell in the Great War and were buried along the Western Front in Belgium and France. But then I extended my limitations also to include those who are buried in the United States as well. And I'm looking in their history of the individuals that they actually have participated in the battles as well. So there are some people who actually went into Great Britain, for example, or in Scotland, and went off on the boat or died during their travels over the Atlantic Ocean. So I have those as well, but I don't count them right now into those 565.
So the primary criterion then is that the soldier must be born in Sweden and fought. And so that's first of all. Second then is that they fought in the Great War or had some
Yes.
participation in the Great War.
Yeah.
Your work really also, at least in the case of the United States, parallels immigration patterns.
Yes. I'm looking into that now as well. And I can see that this is, I'm following up those individuals who emigrated from Sweden and especially into North America at that time. And those are the main part of the soldiers that I have in my research as well. And one of the criteria I had in the beginning was also that they should be born by Swedish parents. But now actually I have one of the parents should be Swedish. So I have extended that as well, because it feels quite strange to exclude individuals as well. So I may extend the criteria further on as well.
So that would be the case of one parent is born in Sweden, but may have immigrated either to the United States or another country before the war, and then the child is born outside of Sweden, but the parent was a native Swede.
Oh, well, I haven't included those who are born in the United States, for example. I have
Okay, I
included those.
understand.
It's like a family that have a Swedish mother, but a father from Germany or
Okay.
from another country. So, but all of the soldiers are born in Sweden.
Okay. I have been actually quite surprised in looking at the number of Gold Star mothers. I've been primarily just looking at the ones that traveled to the Marne American Cemetery in Bello, and how many I have discovered that were Swedish or spoke Swedish, and that was indicated on the interest form for the pilgrimage.
Oh, that's amazing also, and it follows quite well soldiers from the area where we had the most immigration from Sweden to as well. So you can see those patterns, and it's a great number from Illinois, for example, and Minnesota. Yeah.
Minnesota, I could I recognize because I know of the immigration patterns to Minnesota, but Illinois that's a new. Did they primarily immigrate into the Chicago area, or was it north of Chicago?
Primarily, I think it was into the Chicago area, and then they moved out some mostly west and northwest, and also into the Homestead Triangle connected to Canada as well. And you
Yeah,
can see a pattern there as well.
yeah, that's interesting. So most of them were moving as farmers, right? Coming in and then obtaining land and starting farms in the United States.
Yes, as far as I can understand. And also if some of them immigrated as a whole family, but many, I think most of them actually immigrated as an individual, and then looked for job, and they worked in normal places as well in those parts. And a lot of individuals worked in New York, but quite many also moved all the way to the western coast as well, and that's interesting.
Did many of them enlist in the main army, or did they go into National Guard units from their respective states?
I don't have an exact number of those who participated from the National Guard, but many of them did, yes. And I can see more and more when I look into the specific individuals now that there are quite many who actually started in the National Guard before they went over or into the units that was sent over.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing more about that
Yeah.
because it seems to make sense, I guess, if they're coming into particular states, they're then enlisting from that state, probably did not have an intention to join the army when they came to the United States, but they find themselves in the midst of this conflict, and so they are enlisting from their new home.
Yes. And it's also quite interesting to see some of the individuals that are uh, emigrated to North America and actually chose to participate in the Canadian Army when they were into the war earlier. So they chose to go over there and voluntarily do that as well, even if they were American.
That is an interesting phenomenon, and it's not something I know much about, but I have bumped into it a bit because I live in a New England state, and I think there were many thousands of people, primarily Canadians, who had come into the United States but then returned to Canada to go into the army with the Canadians versus from the United States.
Yeah, and I assume that those individuals maybe worked close to the border, or they heard something, or they wanted to do something, and they just chose it for some reason to do it. But
Yeah,
many of them did. Yeah.
yeah. How did you get interested? I mean, I don't want to make the assumption that because you're Swedish and because you're a member of the Swedish Armed Forces that you had a natural interest in these soldiers from the Great War. Although I think that must be part of it. But I'm curious about how you first became interested specifically for around the soldiers of the Great War versus the Second World War or other conflicts.
Yeah, it's actually in as late as maybe 2013, 14 or something. I didn't know much at all about the First World War. Nothing at all, actually. And it started when I was in my course to become a major in the Swedish Army. That I had some tasks to look into some battles of Battle of the Somme, for example, the South African who fought in the battle. And then I did a paper on that, and that was the starting point to give me some insight to the First World War. And I didn't know anything from that start. And if I look back on that paper now, I can see that I didn't know anything at all, even if I made that paper. So that's quite interesting. So no, and many of the Swedes here are interested in the Second World War because we have people who went over there as well from Sweden and participated directly. And but this thing with the First World War became a huge thing later on, which I will tell you more about when we look through the slides and how it started.
And now is maybe a good time to transition to the slides, because likely the questions I will have, you are going to be answering in the slides, and then we can see some of these amazing stories that you have collected. The photographs are really incredible, and so I'm looking forward to seeing those and also hearing the stories about the people that you're meeting who are descendants of either the soldiers or of these families.
Yes. So I will now go into and share my screen. And I will do like that. And I will do like that. Yes. I hope you can see my screen now.
It's perfect. Yep.
Yeah. So I will give you a short brief, and I will talk about some slides that I have in my presentation. And as we said before, it's about Swedes in the Great War. And let's see if I can now do like that. And I will show you some of the artifacts that I came. It's quite recently. This story is quite amazing. I was having a talk for about 3 weeks ago to an organization, and I had some lunch, and my phone was ringing, and I pushed it away because I was about to have my talk within 5 minutes. So then I received a text message from the same number because I thought it was a person. I didn't recognize the number. And the person who texted me was the descendant of this person that we see now on the screen. And I was about to have a talk that he was included in. So that felt very strange. And I haven't had any contact whatsoever with those people before. So that felt great, actually. And he sent me the photo to the right with the frame you see with the photo, the medals, the diary, the letters and everything. And he said, we have found this at home, and we found your story about his story, about what he did on the battlefield on your homepage. So that felt very nice. And after that, I received photos more from the left, and also the what do you call it in the middle now? The plaque or
I think this is a medallion, and
memorial.
in fact,
Memorial.
the very recently, Dr. Megan Kelleher on a podcast episode explained this medallion. So this is from the British Expeditionary Force, right?
Yes. Yes, he was in the Canadian forces, so this is kind of a memorial plaque or memorial. And it was amazing to see that they found these things at the attic of one of the relatives that they were cleaning out the house from. So that was amazing. So we have contact today, and he lives at the same place where my cousin lives. So when I go up there next time, I will north of Stockholm. I'm invited to take part of all those things, and they want me to translate the letters and everything. So that will be a great thing to do.
How did they first find you? Were they Googling information, doing a search about their relative, or how did they explain how they discovered, or what was the impetus for searching to begin with?
I think they found those things at home when they were cleaning out the house, and then they searched on internet for his name, and then they came up to my homepage where I had the story. I have visited his grave many times in Belgium. Yeah. So this is the first slide I want to show you about the things connected to some of the soldiers that I actually have started to have more and more contact to, descendants, as you say, or relatives to the soldiers than I have had before. And next slide is about my my first project to try to make a book. And I made a book and I printed it myself. And I'm in the book. I start with those soldiers who are buried in Belgium. And my thing is to give a story of each individual. I want to tell the story. That's the main thing. And in the book, I also have some information about how the soldiers emigrated from Sweden and became participants in the different armies, like the American Expeditionary Forces, the Canadian Expeditionary Forces, the British troops, the German troops, New Zealand, Australian, and so on. So I have a brief story about that in the beginning of the book, and then it's more like a book for guides on the battlefield. That was my main idea. That's why I have QR codes in them as well, so they can find their way to the cemetery. And then they can have a small story about them. And then there are some photos connected to the soldiers as well.
The QR code, does that contain the GPS coordinate of the grave?
Yeah, it's the address of the cemetery.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have already started on my second book. And you know how it is. Sometimes you have an idea and what to do. And I have decided now to make another book about the individuals. I want to highlight their stories. So that's why it will be a book now about those Swedes who are buried in the Meuse Argonne American Cemetery in France. So that's the next step. And it's 153 of them right now that I have found out.
Wow.
Cemetery.
That are just in that cemetery alone.
Yeah, it's about 1% almost. Yeah.
Yes.
That's quite interesting.
It is. I'm just taking also a look. When you talk about a focus on the stories, what elements of the stories are important for you?
The elements that is important, I picture in front of myself how they actually were born in the places where I have the address to, that I have found in Swedish church books. I can see, and it's very curious to see why they emigrated. It doesn't tell, of course, but I can understand when reading about Swedish emigration why they did it sometimes for different reasons. And I'm very curious about their trip over to another country and what they did over there, how they actually ended up in the different forces and then went over the ocean. In this case, for example, like the Canadian and the American, and also to see how they participated through diaries, through text, through stories, how they ended up in the battlefield and how they died and where they are now. It's an amazing trip to make that, and I want to tell about those stories, and that has become very important for me. Very important.
At this point, have you included in your next book any information about the Gold Star mothers who visited any of these soldiers at Meuse Argonne?
Yes, in those cases where I have that type of information, I have included that as well in the chapter. So I have some soldiers who have their mothers also from, and it's only from those families who moved over to United States. I haven't found anything about any mother who still lived in Sweden and went into the battlefield. I don't know if they even got that option to do that, or if they have any contact or any offer to do that, but I haven't found it yet. So
it's possible they may have gone on their own.
Yeah, and I have some stories about brothers to one soldiers that went to the cemetery in the 50s. That I have found that story, and I have found photos and from that period as well. So
to Meuse Argonne or to one of the other cemeteries?
It was to Meuse Argonne.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I have that soldier maybe in the presentation, or I can tell more about that later on. Yeah, let's see. Yep. Yep. So that is about the book, and my plan now is to send it to a real printer. I have a ISBN number on it, and make it more available through the different channels on internet to buy as well. So I will probably update the first version and make a real book of it as well.
At this point, it can, if there's a listener or viewer who is interested in purchasing it, is it available for purchase?
Yes, it is. I have, and they can they can go to my homepage, westernfront.se, and they can find more information over there. So
Okay.
that's not a problem at all.
I'll link that
Yeah,
at the end.
perfect. Mhm. So this is how it started, actually. It was a trip that I made with some friends down to Ypres in Belgium. And this is photos of Menin Gate Memorial in Ypres. And we went into that and to a lot of other places as well. We just decided, yeah, let's go down to Belgium and to the battlefields of First World War. We didn't know anything, so we just went down there based on that I have done my paper. And I said, yeah, that could be interesting to go down in, and I will show you some of the things that I talked about and so on. And I went into this memorial, and we went to the last post ceremony as well in the evening, and I saw Scandinavian names on the walls. And that felt really strange. So, Anderson is quite common, even outside Sweden, of course, or Swanson or whatever it can be. But I saw other names that was more unusual. And I thought those can be Swedes. And I saw one person. It was a person who had the surname Wikström. And that was typically Swedish. And I followed him up. So that was the first soldier I really digged into. And then I went down into this huge rabbit hole, and it hasn't stopped yet. So it's amazing. I don't know what it is, but I want to find as much information as possible. And as far as I know now, there are 22 Swedish-born soldiers at the Menin Gate today. On the names on the wall.
How have you been able to find that information? Because of a database of names?
Yeah, and I have looked through all the names. There are no information. It's some information from the Commonwealth War Grave Commission, of course. When it comes, you can search for the word Sweden, for example, in the database, and you can have some hits. But that's I think it was just a few, maybe 36 hits or something, and that means that the word Sweden is in the database or written somewhere. But to find all I have looked through names manually, cemetery by cemetery. So I'm not finished yet. So probably there are more out there than those 565. But I have looked through a lot, and it's taken years to do this. So I'm doing it manually, and I'm also trying to search for them in other ways as well through other channels. But one way is to go through the Commonwealth War Grave Commission's databases and just look at the names. But you see, I have found Americans as well with not typically Swedish names, that they are born in Sweden as well. So they have changed their name, especially those who emigrated to United States.
Yes. Let me just go back to this moment that you're first at the Menin Gate is in 2015, 16?
15, 16 somewhere,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
And you are looking at the names, not really thinking about the fact that there may be a Swedish connection. And then you see these few names that seem Swedish. What were you thinking? I mean, what kinds of thoughts were you having beyond just kind of a casual recognition that these names may be Swedish?
I asked myself, of course, how did they end up here? That was the first thing. Why are they on the wall? Have they participated? What what made them participate in the war, and in which unit and so on. And that became the first question. So I'm starting to dig into that. Yeah.
So when you returned to Sweden, how did you first then start down the rabbit hole? How did it open up?
I remember still that I actually started it for real in 2019. In the beginning of the COVID period, and I started to put the name into an Excel format, and then I actually built the database from that. And the first thing was can I fill in some more names? Can I have those? I thought I found 7 in the beginning, and then 8, then 9, and then up to 20. And can I find 50? And then it started to go on. So that was the thing. So I started to build up a database with things and information.
So you've been quite meticulous in your process to confirm that the name and the soldier is in fact Swedish. Can you talk a little bit about that so we can hear about your methodology?
Yeah. First of all, I started to look into the most common Swedish surnames, for example, just by search for them in the database. And then I started to look on the surnames that looks like it is from Sweden, how you pronounce it. So I started to look into that as well. I made my own name convention. So I started to make, especially for the first names, Axel, for example, it often became Alex. So they just switched the letters. And the Swedish name Ernst, it became Ernest. It was Ernest in the
Okay,
United
I've
States.
seen
So I have
I've
to,
seen this
yeah,
one before.
yeah, exactly. So that was the way I started, and then I started to look into those databases on internet, for example, like Ancestry, and started to look in those archives and the digital archives as well. And I started to look at the Swedish church books. I looked into them. I looked in the different parish, and I started to look for the word America. And then I found America, and then you could actually see, did this person who emigrated to America ended up in the army as well? And then I used the different databases out or digital archives on the internet to see if I could make a hit on something. And I have made a chapter in my own parish history book here as well that we have. So I was asked to make a chapter of that, and I found I made a story about 12 individuals who went from here to United States and were connected to the army. And I think 4 or 5 of them were participated in the American units, and I also one guy who fought for Germany. He fell on the battlefield as well, just from 1 kilometer from here, from where I live now. So yeah.
You mentioned that there is information or a notation about America in the Swedish church books, the church records. What kind of information is contained in these records?
It contained where they lived and the names and the families, and also if they have died or when they died, when they have married, and what happened to them when they moved around to the different places, both within Sweden or if they emigrated as well. So that's the information that I have, and it's sometimes hard to see because it's written by a pencil, so it's quite
Yes,
hard to see sometimes. But I
yes.
learned to decipher that as well.
How tremendous that such information was recorded in these sources. I don't know that that's the case for many church records. Often it's just information or rites of passage that are related to the church itself or the person's membership in the church. So that's interesting that there are notations about immigration.
Yeah. So that's an amazing source of information. So we can go further on in the to see. And there we have some examples of those names connected to the Menin Gate. We can see Persson, for example, up to the left. We see Wikström, Svedberg in the middle, Nord, and that means north in Swedish. So Olsson. So those were the names, some of the names that I found on the wall. And I have also some other stories that I'm looking into the church books or in the Swedish archives. In this case, I found information about, there are a book about a soldier, Lieutenant Marcus Grundberg, in a library down south in Sweden. So I called them and I asked, is it okay to come down and look into this book? And yeah. It may be some papers, but maybe you find it worth to go down there. And I did. It took about 2.5 hours to drive down, and then I came into this, and I found this folder, as you see. It's a collection from this lieutenant's former regiment in Sweden that they have collected, and it was about 60 pages of letters from him from the battlefield in this book. So that was an amazing source as well, and that has become a bit of a special story. I'm right into the transcribing those documents right now as well, and as you can see, there are some photos as well. And the thing I do now, I want to connect this person, and I found photos as well of him. And you can see one example of a Swedish text when he wrote home. It says, in the field, 11 of March 1918. And he is writing home to his friend in Sweden. And there are also information that they have transcribed also before. And this is a story when he received his Iron Cross. I think it was the first Iron Cross or maybe the second. And it also says where he received it. And that's interesting because then I can go into the old trench maps, and I have, as you can see, the red ring. And that's the wood that he were in, connected to the document that you saw before, and it's north of Ypres, as you can see in the bottom of the map. And my thing is, I want to go there, so I went there last year now. So this is the wood, as you can see. It's a photo from how it looked back then, and then it's a photo from the Belgian cemetery that is there now. Because that German unit, where he was fighting against the Belgian soldiers in that region, the Belgian forces. And I want to do this. I want to find information about the individual. I want to see where he lived when he lived in Sweden. I can find why he did it. He voluntarily participated for the Germans, as many of the Swedish officers did at that time. But I only have confirmed 8 individuals in my research that fought for Germany. Probably there are more, but not so much. There are another person who has done a research just about this, and we think together, if we compare what we have found, we think it can be 40 to 60 individuals only who decided to fight for Germany in this war. So they have to leave the Swedish army to do this. So they decided to do it, and some of them fell on the battlefield as well. And this is an old photo from the folder where his initial burial site were, and that's his assistant standing by the grave to the left. And I've tried to find that place. It has been quite hard to find if it is a real cemetery today or if it's just a place somewhere in Belgium. And then I have been to the burial site in Menin, just east of Ypres, where he is buried today, as you can see the name on the stone. And it's 47,000 names in that cemetery today, so it's amazing. I'm always alone when I visit this cemetery. And it's, as you can see, the German cemeteries are dark, and they plant trees in it as well. So, and if we go further on, you can ask questions if you want to along the things, but I can also continue to tell some other stories. This is the story about Oscar Backman. he emigrated as with his family to, I think it was directly to New Zealand, or it could have been also Australia in the beginning, and then he went over to New Zealand. There is the full story about him, an article by Wendy Maddox, who has written more thoroughly about his story, and that article is in the book as well. And the thing is, I know where he was born. So you see the church down to the right in Skåne, south of Sweden. And the headstone is today in Belgium, right on the border to France. And you can also see a picture up to the right when we visited the Greymouth in New Zealand and found the village and his name on the memorial there. So that's the thing. I want to connect the dots and draw the full circle.
I was just going to ask two questions.
Mm.
The first has to do with the precision around finding the place, either that the soldier fell or that he is buried. It's really important. I can hear this in what you're saying, and I keep talking to people, especially people who are either historians or who have an interest in World War I, how important this is when commemorating or walking in the footsteps of the soldier to go to the exact place. It is the primary objective. And I was wondering if you could say a little more about that from your perspective.
Yeah. It's sometimes quite hard to find the exact places of where they fell, because that information sometimes you can find in different diaries from the units where they participated in. And I think I have an example of that later on as well. No, but for example, Bertil Lind, as we saw in the beginning of the presentation, I know where he fell because of it says in the diary. So I have been to that place as well, and we stood there and looked into his place. And if I can, I want to find those places. But it's also very important for me to go and visit the final resting place, or the burial site. And when I do that, I can't explain, but it's a very, very strong feeling. They become like a family member when you look into the faith, and when you know so much about them, where they came from, and I can almost hear them speak sometimes, but you can't. I think you understand sometimes.
Yes.
But when you also do that, and when you are at the site, when you can see the name on the headstones, and it's an amazing feeling, and it touches me very much. That's I don't know where it comes from, but it's a great feeling. Sometimes it's very sad as well, but that feeling has forced me almost to, I must do this for every individual that I find, not to forget them, and to highlight that they are there out in the battlefield, and that's my mission.
It does become quite a responsibility, and some people call it a calling to this process or act of remembering. I think it's more than that, though, because there is something about also being a mourner for
Yeah.
this loss of life 100 years or 100, a little over 100 years later, which is what I also wanted to ask you about. You mentioned going to the cemetery alone, and I wanted to ask you about why you have chosen to do that. Probably sometimes it's just a matter of practicality. You are by yourself, but is there something more to it?
Uh, what I meant about when I'm alone, then I meant there is no other people around, but I can also go together with people, as I have done. Many people have followed me during my small trip, so to say, but mainly I do it on my own. So that's what I meant by being alone. And being alone on places where there are so many headstones, especially the German cemeteries, you can always see people in the Commonwealth cemeteries, but mostly connected to the more common places on the battlefields, like Somme or close to Ypres or whatever. But in the there are so many cemeteries to visit, and most of the times there is no other people in the cemeteries. But it's also a special feeling to do it alone as well. But I find it very nice as well to do it together with other people. I have done that with some people who has become very interested in the thing I do, and so on.
German cemeteries, well, as you pointed out, they're somber. The headstones, tombstones are dark, and they do seem there. There's just a different feeling or energy with them, primarily because in some ways, there is a sense that maybe they're forgotten, and I wonder if through the lives of these Swedes who left Sweden and fought for Germany, does this give you a chance to sort of connect with the other side of this war in a way that many people do not intentionally set out to do?
Yes, I'm trying to see it from both sides, and there are stories. The more I look into the situations, I can now find situations where I know that some of the Swedes who fought for the German side and some of the Swedes who fought for the American side actually were at the same area at the same time. And then I have one example of that as well. If I don't have it in my slides, as I see it that I will tell you more about that as well. So, and sometimes I find information about that. That's amazing. The thing I do, I also have some local connection to my own regiment where I work today. It has been another type of regiment back in the days, but it's the same buildings as well as they were, and the same training ground area. And this is a soldier from the town where I work in Eksjö, in the region of Småland. And he fought for the Canadian forces. And the interesting thing you can find from the Canadian archives is often quite a lot of information in the cards that you find. And the other example is that this is the young person of Willy Höglund, and he fought for the German side. It's a Swedish uniform, but he fell in the area of Belleau Wood. He was wounded in the date of 16th of June, and another soldier who was Swede, who fought for the 5th Marine Corps, he died on the 16th of June as well. So you can see the unit, and I always wonder if they probably didn't meet, but you never know. Did they know that they were Swedes on the other side as well, or didn't they? I don't know. So this is an example of that.
It makes me wonder about if they didn't know, if their families ended up knowing, and if there were relatives that remained in Sweden, especially if these soldiers were within close proximity in Sweden, if their families talked about this.
Yeah, you never know. It would be really interesting. That's a thing maybe you can find in books. I have some books about Swedes who fought in the Great War and wrote books afterwards, and you can I haven't found that type of information though. The only thing I can find that they knew that there were other Swedes in the unit as they fought in. Yeah. If we continue, we can see an example of that. They were also Swedes who fought for the American Expeditionary Forces that died and were buried in the cemeteries in France, but they were brought home to Sweden, and there are 17 of them. And I have found 17 cards that says they were shipped to Sweden. And I have found documents in old newspapers from United States that actually it says 17. So I probably have found all of them. So that's interesting to also connect those type of information to confirm in a way. And this is one example. I have only been to 2 places, and this is one of them, quite close to where I live as well. I was out working and I took the road to the cemetery, and this is Ernst Jonsson. As you can see, his name is Ernest Johnson. So that's an example of how they also came home. And I assume that they were asked if they wanted to have their relatives sent home. Or I have found documents in Minnesotan archives that says that they have had that question. So I've seen examples.
That is true. And the burial files, soldier files that are at the National Archives in the United States contain typically these letters that it was a form that the family could specify whether they wanted the remains to stay in France or in Belgium, or if they wanted them to be repatriated back.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though that the letters were also sent to Sweden. I'm assuming these are situations where the family remained in Sweden.
Yes, and when they had the address of as a next of kin,
Yep.
for example, as you can find some information, quite a lot of information actually in the American archives. So other things, connection or contact with relatives. I have spelled some words wrong here, but it doesn't matter. But this is the story where I will follow up now on my upcoming trip in April. I have contact with Mark Erickson in California. So these relatives to him participated in the war, and it was actually 3 brothers. Ernest, up to the left, he died on the battlefield, and Frank, he survived, and he participated in the unit who is called the Lost Battalion. And I have there's a lot of information, and I have found also letters from him in Swedish written home that he says from the 25th of September 1918, saying, yeah, we will now go out on a big offensive. So it's quite interesting to read that in Swedish. It's amazing. More contact, for example, this is Axel Rydell. He is buried in the Flanders Field American Cemetery in Belgium. I have received contact to his relatives in the United States through a Belgian officer, as you can see in the small picture, which I have contact with today. And it's amazing. I try to meet up with him every time when I go down there. And to the left, I visited the soldiers' parents' burial site, not far away from me. So I sent that picture of the headstone to the family up in the picture, as you can see as well. So I try to keep contact with them, and they think it's amazing to to combine those stories. And I always have, in the most cases, I have to tell the relatives about the military story. They know, of course, about the family in most cases. More contact with relatives. This was a name. I looked for him in Ancestry, in the database in Ancestry, and I saw there was no photo of him in Ancestry. So I actually contacted the relative who put the things into Ancestry, and I asked them, do they have any photos? And I told them the military story of Axel Albert Eriksson in this case, and you can see his name, A.A. Eriksson, on the missing in action memorial at the Anne Marne Cemetery. That's amazing. So they thought it was. They said to me, we will try to look at the attic or in the boxes that we have. So he was a relative to that person's husband that I spoke to. And they said, we can't find anything. But one day they found, here we have, and that's the story. So I connect the pieces of the puzzle, and it's amazing to see that was him. So he becomes a face to that name. that's a strong feeling from my point of view.
Yes, even more so
Yeah.
because he is on the wall of the missing, but he's not missing. He's been
No.
found in a different way.
Yes, exactly. And that's amazing. And this is another example of one soldier, a Swedish soldier who fought for the French Foreign Legion. And it was about 40 to 50 individuals who decided to do that. They did it from Sweden, but also from Paris, where many of those guys lived when the war broke out. And they decided to, let's have an adventure. And they ended up in the French Foreign Legion as they were foreigners. And it turned out that this guy was a relative to one of my colleagues at work as well. So I didn't know that. And I showed him, that's my, and he told me about the connection. It's amazing. And it's a very nice photo of him also. And I like to connect the things. And the photo to the right is the memorial on the Swedish church in Paris, where all the 16 names are of those who fell in the war.
I didn't realize there was a Swedish church in Paris. It's do you know anything about the church when it was
I haven't
built?
been there myself, so that's the thing I have left.
Yeah.
I have to visit that
you have
church.
These places you have to go.
Yeah, and I have to visit the American cemetery in Paris as well.
Yeah.
Sureneo, how do you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Suren. So that's one of the places I have still to go to and take a photo of those headstones as well. As you can see also, these are some photos from the Moroccan Division Memorial up in Vimy Ridge in France. And I discovered a sign with Swedish text on it. So for memory of the Swedish volunteers who here fought for France. So that's quite interesting to read that in Swedish.
Yes, incredible.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about the plaque or how this came to be, that it has Swedish on it?
No. I have asked people to try to look for it, but some organization must have put it up there. I don't know when, but that's interesting. So and that's a nice feeling, because there are 17 names who fought for the Canadian units at Vimy Ridge that were also Swedish-born soldiers. So they are missing in action, and their names are on the memorial on the Vimy Ridge. I came into, when I met the guy from Belgium at Flanders Field Cemetery, he is a head of an organization who actually adopts headstones or individuals connected to the headstones. And I was asked to do that. And I could choose this guy. And he's born at the same date as me in 16th of December. So that's why he was one of the earlier I found in my research. His name is actually Ringius. And his surname is changed. So now it is Williams, but he is actually Wilhelmsson, because his father was Wilhelm. So Wilhelm's son. So, and then they changed it to Williams because it was probably hard to pronounce. So that's also, Ringius Williams is not a typical Swedish name. So you have to look, you have to dig in. So I have a certificate. I'm now I have adopted him, and I will visit him now when I go down to Belgium in July to put some flowers on the headstone. There we have some of connecting the dots, as I explained before about the Bertil Lind story. So collecting some types of information, as you can see there. It's diaries, it's maps, and in the text, the trench number 33 is mentioned, and I have found a map with the trench numbers. And in the 2023 trip, I took the Swedes who followed me on that trip to that place where he fell. And then we went to the cemetery to visit his last burial site as well. So yeah, this is a thing that it has become very important for me to do this, to collect as much information I can. Mm-hmm.
Anyone anyone could probably collect the information, but it's also what you're doing with it and how you're collecting it, but then you are using it to connect people to the battlefield, and people to the burial sites, and people to other people in Sweden, and to grave sites in Sweden. So you are really a hub of connection for all of these Swedish soldiers.
Yes, and I think more and more relatives has contacted me lately. So it started to reach other people out there now. And I do a lot of talks as well. I will have one talk tomorrow, for example, to an organization, and no, it's I like it very much. I can talk so much about this, and I want to spread the information, and I want to highlight this because they are out there, as I say, they are. And one of the stories now we will look into more as well on the upcoming trip now in April. I have contacted, and this was through a talk. A person came to me afterwards and says, hey, I have friends back home in my hometown that has connections. They have relatives. And there it was. We almost have contact now every day. So he's looking forward to this. And those persons survived the war. They went home, back to Sweden. They participated in the 54th Pioneer Infantry in the American Expeditionary Forces. And you can see Eric Larsson's gas masks equipment to the left. And it's amazing to see that they have found this in the Swedish house back home. And its name is on it. You can see the AEF and the unit, and also photos with him in uniform. They have collected, they have probably found some Iron Cross in one way or another. They had his helmet and so on. And the relatives of those guys, one of it or both of them, I don't know really for sure now, they will follow me on the trip now. One of the guys is 80 years old and he has decided to come down, and he wants to be in the area where those soldiers were. And I know where they were. So I will share that information. And that's a huge thing for me as well.
You're really giving people a certain element of meaning and a way to look back into their own family history that is dynamic and helps people understand their own family lineage, but also helps it make sense. It's not just that this person existed a few generations ago, but you are bringing the soldier to life and bringing the immigration stories to life, and periods of these soldiers' lives in the United States before they went to war.
Yeah, exactly. And if we connect the things that happened back then and today, we come up with, as you see the sign in the middle, there is 4 names on that sign. This is a sign from the chapel in the military academy in Stockholm, and their names, if they fell in battles, their names went up on that sign. And there are 4 who fell in the First World War, and I have looked into every one of them. But also there are, what will happen to those who these are only 2 examples. One of them, the guy to the left, is one of my soldiers that I have had I worked with him in Afghanistan. And it's so tragic that he, last year now in October, November, he disappeared in the war. So I won't be able to visit him, or will I? I don't know. As the way I do with the soldiers who decided to fight in the American forces or the Canadian forces. And that's he was 34, I think, when he died now last year, and he was 21 or so on the photo. And the other guy was the first who died, and his name is the last name 2022 on the sign. And it took a while to actually say to those persons that his name should be up on that sign as well. But now it is. Because he was a student in the military academy, that's why his name is on there. The other one has chosen to fight for different organizations, and they knew what they did. And I say history and today, and even if it's Ukraine or other wars, and there are people who do this voluntarily as other people did back then, and we must not forget them. So that's my last slide, I think, in my presentation so far. And so now we can either stop sharing it or we can go back to slides if you want that as well.
Yeah.
So.
We can stop sharing. I have written a few points.
Mhm.
It's very sobering to see your last slide and to realize this is not something that's in the past. It's not 100 years in the past only. It's not only 80 years in the past or 20 years in the past. It's a reality that's happening now. And there are people from your country who are dying in Ukraine, and so the gravity of your work takes on. It's very heavy to think about what remembrance means and why individuals should be remembered.
Yeah. And I used to have this slide now in my presentations because in the beginning I couldn't speak when I saw those. I have done this quite many times now during the late months, so I have been used to see that. But in the beginning, it was very hard to actually present the slide to know what he did, and it's sad. But he was so determined because he had relatives from Finland, and the story about them in the Second World War and their relatives, what they did to their enemy, and what the enemy did to them, and I can understand.
What do you think all of this means? It seems like you've talked about being your Swedish identity, and you've talked about visiting individual graves of Swedes, but also to places where the regiment that you serve with now, where they were in the First World War. And you've talked about connecting families, and it seems like all of these pieces are part of you, that through this you're also learning about yourself and making meaning for yourself as an individual.
Yes, it has become a very large part of my life right now. And I used to ask myself, what does it mean? I want to tell people, and I do that through my talks, that there are Swedes. It wasn't Sweden as a nation, but it was Swedes who did this. And I have decided also to look more into the word Swede. Is it a nationality or is it another thing? And I have decided, I have made a mind map, maybe for an upcoming uh, uh, article or paper or whatever, and try to figure out, because in some of the Swedish American newspapers back at that time, it says uh, 4 Swedish brothers fought in the English unit or the British unit. And then when you read about them, they were born in UK. With their father was also a Brit, but they said they were Swedes. And I have tried to find, is it a criteria to be called a Swede, or did we call them Swedes to highlight what they did? Was it good in some situations? Was it bad in some situations? I will try to dig into that as well. That's a sidetrack though, but it doesn't it doesn't pass a day without me thinking about those things. It's like a mission, and I have to fulfill that mission to visit the soldiers that I find in different archives that actually participated within my criteria, and I will tell the story. That's my mission, and I will not stop. That's a huge thing of my daily business today. So I make trips, and it's amazing to find the headstones, to go into the cemetery. I have a small ceremony. I say a few words to them, and I salute them because I know what they did. It must been a huge. They were probably afraid. Some of them have got medals. Some of them had done really huge things within the battles as well. And I have the stories from some of those soldiers. So it has become a huge thing for me to do this.
Well, the last theme, I don't know if it'll be the last question, but the last theme I wanted to explore with you is this concept of pilgrimage and whether you see what you do as a type of pilgrimage or if it's something else.
I have thought about that thing because I have seen some of your other episodes as well. And it's a very interesting thing. And I'm thinking it like this. I'm doing it for the relatives. So I'm an extended person who actually connects and hold their threads in my hand. And I go to their relatives. And it's almost like I say, now I have, he's not forgotten. And I have thought about that. Is that kind of a pilgrimage or is it not? Because it's like a tourist thing. I understand that when I take people down to the battlefield. But the main reason they have chosen to follow me on my trips, it's because they also like to hear about the individuals and their stories. And now it's the first time when I have relatives with me who has been not those who fell in the war, but who participated in the war. And so for me, it's like an extended pilgrimage that I do for the relatives. And I do it. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing I can do for them.
So you see yourself as an extension of the family, where the family may or may not have visited the grave at one point, or may not have been to these sites, but you go as a family member.
That's a feeling I have. And all of them that I have spoken to, they haven't had a clue about this story. They haven't known, they don't know where they are. And I have told them. So now I have filled their information with more information about the relatives and where he is. And the relatives to Bertil Lind, they actually wants to go down with me to the site. So they are very interested in doing that now. And that's also a thing. Maybe I can, because they are quite young still. But I say like this, when will those individuals be forgotten? There are not so much generations left, and soon there will be no memories if we don't collect the memories of those individuals. It will be only me who knows this from the archives. So that's why I do it as well. So yeah, you can say that I may be an extended family member.
It makes sense then that your visits would be pilgrimages because there is such a personal connection that you have to the soldiers, but also the personal connection where you serve as a bridge between the family and that soldier. So, from my perspective, it seems very much like you are occupying the role or the identity of a pilgrim while you're in this journey, and that the movement towards these places and then your time at the gravesite is definitely a pilgrimage.
Yeah. And the thing when I do this is so strong. That's why I do this. It's when I open the gate to the cemeteries and I see the names on the headstones. It's like the time stands still. I don't know why. But
I think it's an indicator that you're supposed to be doing this, that this is something that you are meant to do with your life and with your time.
Yeah, it feels like that. So I will continue.
Last question. How would you like to be remembered?
Yeah, well, that was a good question. I haven't thought about that. I would like to be remembered as a person who actually highlighted the fates of those individuals. I want to be that. I want to be a person. I don't call myself an historian or whatever, even if I am a kind of historian. I don't have any academic backgrounds or academic work yet. But for me, that's not important right now, because I write the same text as an academic person would have done anyway. Maybe they should have made some other conclusions or whatever, and made it in a special structured way. But I want to be remembered as a person. It was him who did it. So, and I can see now many people are, when it comes up a question, for example, on different social media, you can check with Joacim or check with Jocke. So it's a nice thing, and I'm glad to help.
Thank you so much for talking about the Swedes and for keeping their memory alive wherever they fell, and for whatever army they may have fallen for, whatever state they may have fallen for. You are definitely, there's no one else that I think of when I think about Swedes on the Western Front and the Swedish soldiers. You're always the person that comes to mind, and it's been rewarding to participate in a few cases in alerting you to the fact that there may be another Swede that has been found.
Thank you very much. It has been great to do this, because it's a nice thing to tell people about the situation and also what I feel about. This was just a few slides, but also I will now go back again to Anne Marne American Cemetery in the Belleau Wood, and we will talk about 4 or 5 individuals down there as well. And it will be really nice, because I know you have special connections to that place as well. So, yeah.